Hi everyone, so here's an example of our project. Our goal is to track when an email link is clicked by a developer. So imagine if you are a project manager in a software project and you send an email to a developer, for example. You want to know if they have opened the link in that email, which would indicate they have read the task assigned to them. For example, when we send an email by clicking this button, an email will be sent. You'll see a toast dialog at the bottom that says email has been sent. Okay, so when we check the Gmail account of that person, we can see the email has arrived. When we open it, our app needs to detect if the link is clicked, which will redirect to where the task for the developer can be read. So here on the dashboard, when the link is clicked, the status should change from pending to clicked. So let's go back to our email and click the review task link. Okay, for example, this link will redirect to the user where they can read the task assigned to them, either pointing to another website or a specific URL. When we return to the dashboard, you'll see that the status of the email has been updated to clicked. So our application has the ability to receive webhook events from our email API, which will notify our application about certain events that have happened with that email and respond in real time. The services we'll use here are first, for our email API, we'll use Resend, which is a new addition to the Laravel ecosystem. It's one of the new mail drivers in Laravel, besides Mailgun and other stuff. Here's the website for Resend. Their website is really cool actually. Next, we'll use Expose. This is a local host tunneling service. This will allow us to receive events from Resend in our application via Webhook. It has a free version and is easy to set up. Then we'll also use WebSockets to update the status of our email in real time. For this, we'll use Laravel Reverb to handle real-time functionality of updating the status from pending to clicked. Okay, so let's start with our small project. We'll begin by setting up everything we need for our application. And of course, I will link the project files in the video description so you could follow along if you like. Okay, let's get started. So first, we need to configure Laravel to enable our emailing capabilities. On the Laravel website, let's go to the mail documentation. Under the driver prerequisites, there are several options here like Mailgun, Postmark, and others. But we will use the Resend driver. So let's copy the Composer installation command to install the driver. So after installing the Resend driver, we need to ensure the Resend configuration option is accessible in our services config file. So let's check this in our code editor. Okay, it is properly set. Next, in our mail config file, we should see the Resend option there as well. Okay, after this, we'll configure our environment file to set the mailer option to use the Resend driver. Alright, everything looks good so far. So the next step is to install the official Composer package for Resend. Let's go to the Resend website. In their documentation, they have several options for quick start installation guides. Here's the Laravel quick start guide. When we open it, we'll see the Composer installation command. So let's copy it and run it in the terminal. After installing the official Resend package, we need to configure our API key. Okay, in the documentation, under step number 2, copy the Resend API key variable, then go to our environment file and paste it there. We'll generate the API key from the Resend dashboard shortly. So first, let's sign into our Resend dashboard. I'll log in into my account first. After logging in, this is what the Resend dashboard looks like. And as you can see, I have some other test emails here, but we'll get back to that later. Now go to the API keys menu where we can generate new API keys. So click the Create API Key button. In the dialog, give it a unique name. For example, let's just call it dev. For the permissions, select full access and all domains. Click Add. Once the API key is generated, copy it. Then go back to our environment file and paste the API key there. And don't worry if you can see my API key here. There's no need to be concerned, I've already deleted this key. It no longer exists after this recording. Okay, so let's go back to the recent dashboard. Next, in the domain section, you can configure your domains here. So for this example, I'm using my personal domain, which you can see here is already verified. We need to use a real domain here to utilize Resend for our emailing in Laravel. This will also allow us to test webhooks later for our real-time notification when the receiver clicks the link in the email. In your case, you'll click the Add Domain button and follow the instructions. There's a simple validation process to prove that you own the domain, but it's a straightforward process. Once you have verified your domain, we can continue. Let's go back to our code editor, and in our environment file, under the mail options, we'll change the mail from address to the address specified in our recent dashboard. This is the domain you see here. After this, we can remove the other options. So when using the recent driver, options like mail host, the mail port, username, etc. are no longer necessary. This is one of the advantages of Resend. It requires minimal configuration, so we can delete all these unnecessary options. After this, we can now generate our mailables in Laravel. We'll use Markdown mailables for this. So copy this command to generate the class and email template. We'll replace the order shipped with task email. And rename this template to just task, which will be located inside the mail folder under resources. So after generating the class and the email template, let's check the task email class. Let's change the subject of our email template to dev task. Okay, we're done with this class. Now our template is located in resources, views, mail folder. In the task.blade.php file, let's modify the message in this template as well. Let's modify the title to, for example, task for the week. Then for the button, we'll specify a temporary URL that redirects us when the button is clicked. So for example, we'll use the Laravel website for now. Let's also change the button label to review task. Okay, after this, let's go to the task emails.esx component to start implementing the email sending functionality. Here's the dashboard similar to the preview I shown you earlier. This is where we have the list of developers or employees, for example, to whom we can send task emails. Okay, so for example, when I click the button here, it will send an email to a developer so they can check their tasks for the day. And in real time, when they click the link we send in the email, the status on our dashboard will update from pending to clicked. This happens in real time, so we don't need to refresh the page. So let's go back to the task emails component. At the bottom of our table, we have a button here. This is the envelope button that allows us to send an email. For this example, I won't create a dialog for composing the email message itself to keep the discussion short. When I click this button, it will directly send a task email. So if you want to implement a dialog for composing email messages, you can certainly do that. But for this example, we'll just send the email straight away, but you get the idea there. So at the bottom, let's add an on-click event handler to call the send email function and pass in the user's email. Of course, we need to define this function at the top. And the parameter or the argument for this function will be the email, which is a string. Let's declare it as an asynchronous request. Use await and axios.post to specify the endpoint where we'll send the email. So for example, send task email, and we'll pass the email as the payload for the request. When the request succeeds, we'll display a simple toast notification at the bottom of our dashboard. I've already created a toast here, as you can see. We'll set the title to sent and the description to your email has been sent. And we also need to declare the send task email in our web routes. I have already created one within the auth middleware group, as you can see. We need to create the task controller class, which doesn't exist yet. So let's open our terminal and create the controller. PHP artisan make controller. Then inside controller, we'll declare a method to send the email. So let's just call it send email. I'll just add a comment above. This method will accept our request and call the mail class. We'll specify the recipient of the email as request and the email. Instead of using the send function, we'll send this to the queue for background processing. We'll use the queue method and specify our task email class, instantiated with new task email. Okay, so let's test if we can send an email. Remember, we pushed the email to the queue, so in the terminal, we'll run the queue worker. Okay, so let's go back to our dashboard. And whoops, our user interface switched to dark mode automatically because it's evening here. When I'm recording this, I'll switch it back to light mode for now. Okay, so let's test if we can send an email. Open the developer console and go to the network tab. Okay, so when I click the send email button, for example, this one. Okay, status 200. And in our terminal, the queue worker is running. Let's check our Gmail account to see if the email arrived. Refresh. Yep, here's our email. When we open it, this is our template. So our next goal is to ensure that when the review task button is clicked and it successfully redirects to the destination URL, the status in our dashboard should update from pending to clicked. That's what we'll work on next. I'll close the Laravel tab for now and delete the opened email. So our next step is to set up Webhook. We'll create a Webhook endpoint in the recent dashboard. Go to your recent dashboard and look for the Webhooks menu. Here you can configure or add a Webhook endpoint, where recent will dispatch events that have happened. In our case, when we click the review task button, for example. Click the add Webhook button. Then in the dialog box, you'll see a list of events. You can choose which events you need. But before we choose an event, we need to provide an endpoint URL. Since we are still in a development environment and not yet in production, we'll need to use a localhost tunneling service, like Expose. This will generate our URL that allows Resend to send events to our application. Our application needs to be publicly accessible for Resend to send us web events. If you don't have an account with Expose yet, signing up is very easy and they offer a free version of the service. Since I already have it on my machine, I'll run or open the localhost tunneling service here. In the root of our application, I'll just run the command expose, share, and then specify my local domain. After this, we'll see an output in our console displaying our public URL, which is secured with HTTPS, as well as our localhost dashboard to monitor the requests happening in our application. When I open this link, you'll see the exposed dashboard here. Here, you can view the incoming request for our webhook. I'll copy this public HTTPS URL and then go back to the Resend dashboard and paste it into the endpoint URL input box. This is our temporary endpoint. I'll add /resend/webhook at the end. In the events section below, we need to select the email.clicked event. This event allows Resend to detect when the link in our email is clicked. Okay, so after creating our webhook endpoint, go to the domain tab. In this section, ensure that the click tracking is enabled in your domain configuration. This will allow Resend to monitor if a link in the email we sent has been clicked. Now, the next step is to go back to our webhook section. Here on the right side, you'll see the signing secret key. The signing secret key will be used to verify that the requests coming to our webhook endpoint are genuinely from Resend and not from any third-party sources. Since our webhook endpoint is publicly accessible, it's crucial to ensure that the incoming requests originate from Resend. So let's copy our signing secret and in our environment file, specify the Resend webhook secret and paste the value of our signing secret there. Okay, we have completed the webhook configuration step. Another important setting that we need to do is to exclude our webhook endpoint from CSRF verification. To achieve this, we can go to the Bootstrap directory of our project, specifically in the app.php file. Here we can specify the exemption for our webhook endpoint from CSRF verification. We just need to use the middleware to validate CSRF tokens. We can add an exemption here as an array. And let's specify the endpoint of our webhook, which is just /resend/*. This means that any URL path starting from /resend/ followed by any additional segments integrated by the asterisk will be exempted from CSRF token validation. This is an important step you need to do, otherwise Resend won't be able to send events to our application. And this segment of our URL, the /resend/*, corresponds to the segment of our webhook URL, here at the end. Okay? So let's test our webhook implementation now. When I click the button here to send an email on our Resend dashboard, we should see the dispatch webhooks from Resend in our webhook panel when someone clicks the link in the email. Okay, so let's try this again. Send email. Okay, sent. Now let's go to the Gmail account. Here's our email. When we click the review task, Resend should send an event to our application. Okay, let's close the Laravel page, go to the Webhooks dashboard, and you'll see the status of our webhook event. The status is successful. This means that Resend detected the event where someone clicked the link in our email. And finally, the next step we'll take is for our application to detect when someone clicks the link in the email we sent. Here in our application dashboard, we need the status to change from pending to clicked in real time. To achieve this, we'll use Laravel Reverb for this purpose, so we won't need to refresh the page to update the status. Let's go back to our code editor, and in our web routes file, we'll declare a post request here where our webhook event from Resend will come in. It's a post request at resend/webhook. We'll accept the request payload here. So first, let's fetch the user to whom we sent the email. User where email. And let's first inspect the contents of the payload Resend sent to us. If we go back to the documentation, here in the webhooks link, under event types and in the email.click section, here's the example payload that Resend will send via webhooks. As you can see, the email address where we sent this is under the to property, which is an array. Let's update our query. Once we have identified the user to whom we sent the email, we can update the status here, setting the task checked at to now, which represent the current time. So if you check our database structure, you'll find a task checked at column in our users table. So let's try this again. Go back to our dashboard and send another email. Okay, it was sent. Then return to the Gmail account. Here's the email. Click the review task button to see if the webhook event from Resend reaches our application and updates the status in the database. Clicking the review task button opens the URL we specified. Let's check if the status updates in the database. I'll refresh the database connection. The status has been updated. Okay, it recorded the timestamp when we received the webhook event. Now, for the final step, we need to update the status on the dashboard in real time. So after updating the status in the database, we'll broadcast an event here. We'll notify the project manager who is the currently logged in user. Let's first fetch the project manager to obtain the ID of the user. Currently, the project manager is the logged in user. You might wonder why am I fetching the user in this query? Well, This endpoint is external and specifically responds to webhook events. Since Resend dispatches events to this endpoint, we can't retrieve the currently authenticated user here, even if it's within the auth middleware group. That is one thing to keep in mind. Okay, here at the bottom, we'll broadcast an event. To begin, we need to create an event class. In the terminal, let's generate an event class using PHP artisan make event. Let's name it webhook received. Next, let's navigate to the class and configure it. First, implement the should broadcast interface and update the channel name to webhook for now. We'll come back to this shortly. Now we need to set up Laravel for real-time functionality, which is very easy. Let's go to the Laravel documentation for instructions. Search for Reverb. You can find the command to install Laravel's broadcasting capabilities there. Just run this command and it will guide you through installing broadcasting in Laravel. After you have done this, please ensure that you have the necessary configuration variables set up for Reverb in your environment file. These config values include specifying your local domain in the Reverb host variable and setting HTTPS for Reverb scheme variable. Since I have local SSL configured, and also don't forget to change the broadcasting connection from log to Reverb. Okay, so the next step is to actually broadcast the event. So here, let's call the broadcast helper function. Then instantiate the webhook received class. This will accept two arguments. First is the project manager, and the second is the webhook payload from Resend. And let's cast this to an array. And of course, in our webhook receive class, we need to accept those arguments. In the constructor method, first the user. This is going to be public. And the webhook payload itself. And in the broadcast on function, we also need to specify the channel for this. We are going to concatenate the ID of the user who needs to receive this event. This is going to be the ID of the project manager. In the channels route file, I've already updated the channel name there. So now we concatenate the ID of the currently authenticated user here because this is a private channel. If you are interested in learning more about Laravel Reverb, you can check out my other videos on Laravel Reverb for additional information. Okay, we're almost done. We just need to listen to our WebSocket events in the front end. So in the tasks emails.tsx React component, where the list of developers and the status are located, we have the send email function here we created earlier. I've also set up a basic state to store the email address received from the Resend webhook. Using this email, we can dynamically update the status of the event in our table. Now, let's write the code to listen to the webhook connection. We'll place this inside the useEffect hook, so it executes whenever the component is mounted. So we'll use the echo.private, and by the way, make sure that the echo.js file is imported in the bootstrap.ts file so that the echo class is globally available for use, okay? Let's continue. Concatenate the user's ID like this, webhook dot, and then specify the user ID. This argument corresponds to the channel name in the channels route file, okay? So after this, we call the listen function and specify the event class name itself. Webhook received. Next, accept a second argument, which is the event containing the payload received from our event. We'll use this information to retrieve the email address that needs its status updated. It will be accessed through webhook underscore payload .data.to. Remember that the to property is an array, so we'll grab the first item. This webhook payload property is, of course, from the webhook receive class, as named here. After setting this up, if you scroll down, you'll find the badge component used to indicate the status of the clicked email event. Here, I have simply changed the badge's color and text based on the email status using a basic conditional statement, which I have already implemented to save us some time. Okay, so let's proceed with testing this. Let's return to the dashboard. As you can see, the status was updated immediately because we tested this earlier, right? Okay, first, let's reset the status in the database so we can see this in action. I'll clear the task checked at column. Okay, back in the dashboard, refresh the page, and let's try this out. And of course, don't forget to start the WebSocket server first so we can receive the event in real time. In the terminal, run php artisan reverb start. I will also include the debug flag. Also, ensure that our queue worker is running. If it seems to have terminated, simply restart it. Okay, finally, let's test this out. We'll send an email. Okay, email has been sent. Checking the Gmail account. There's the email. Clicking the review task link. Okay, returning to the dashboard. And there you go. It updated so quickly. The status was updated in real time very fast. Okay, checking our webhook events from Resend's dashboard. As you can see, we have 3 successful webhook events here. If you click on one of these, you can inspect the payload being sent to our application here. And remember, you can also inspect the data from Expose's dashboard right here. As you can see, we have 3 successful responses here as well. Down here, you can also inspect the payload that was sent, just like in Resend's dashboard, okay? So let's try this one last time before we conclude. This time on a different email address, just to see if this is working as intended. So let's try this one. It's a real email address I created for this example. Okay, email has been sent. I'm going to switch to that account now. And here's the email. As you can see, this is the address where I sent the email. Clicking the link. Okay. Going back to the dashboard. And there you go. It updated. Perfect. Okay, that's it, everyone. I hope you learned something. For more information about Resend, you can always refer to their documentation and even try other webhook events if you like. Resend is the newest addition to Laravel's mail driver and is actually a really good alternative to Mailgun and others. Because Resend is more developer friendly, and as you can see in their dashboard, there is very little configuration needed to integrate this properly. In addition to that, there's also a free plan with a limit of 3,000 emails per month, which I think is very generous. Mailgun only offers about 1,000 emails per month for the free plan. Okay, that's it. Thank you for watching, guys, and see you next time.